Hi. Happy Wednesday. Big hi to Mark and Jim and James and everybody else who's joining the Wednesday Coffee with Kim party. I am so excited to dive. I'm always excited. Hi, let's be honest. I'm always excited for Wednesdays. As you know, it's my favorite day of the week because we get to be here in community with each other, learning, copying from other people's homework, people that are way smarter than we are in their specific fields and niches. And I love it. I leave with all sorts of aha moments. I hope you leave with all sorts of aha moments. They might not hit you right away. They might come a couple days later in the shower, on a run. You think to yourself, oh yeah, I remember we were talking about that. That kind of triggered something. So hopefully they're hitting you, maybe not right now, but at some point they're hitting you. And I'm really excited because today we are going to chat with my friend Charlie. And he's amazing. If you didn't have time to cyber stalk him before today, he is a really cool guy. And I think we're going to learn a lot from him. I'll kind of give you the overview of all things Charlie before he joins us. But Charlie is a general partner and an amazing investor at Brooklyn Bridge Ventures. And that is an amazing fund based in Brooklyn, obviously Brooklyn Bridge Ventures in New York City. And Charlie manages, $30 million across 3 separate funds. So a lot of money. And he invests this money in pre-seed and seed companies. So for anybody that's not in like the startup world or you haven't watched episodes of Shark Tank, pre-seed and seed companies are basically like baby companies, like infant companies. So what really sets Charlie apart is most times, Shark Tank being a great example, you either already have a product or a service, and maybe you've been in business for like a year or two and you have a business plan. Maybe you have some other investors and proof of concept. And, Mark Cuban's like, well, how many people have bought that peanut butter? What sets Charlie apart is he invests in companies before all that. So before you have a product, before you have an inkling of an idea, before you have anything, he's there. He's there and he's potentially investing in you and your idea. So he comes in pre-product, pre-deck. So he's like way before Shark Tank ever happens. And what I really love about Charlie, especially in this moment in time, is that he will meet with you and talk with you without an introduction. And for anybody that works in business, you know, if you want to meet with somebody high up at a company, you kind of have to know someone. Like you have to have a friend of a friend introduce you, or you got to kind of like worm your way in. And that's kind of how startup investing works too. A lot of times the only way you're getting these really important meetings is because you know someone or you already had a successful startup. And if you are just a human with a great idea, you might not know the right people to talk to. And so what I love is that can be a huge barrier to entry. You know, you can have a great idea and just not know the right people. So what I love about Charlie is that he will meet with you without all of that jazz, all of that warm intro, which can really hamper some great ideas from coming to fruition. So there's lots more to say about Charlie, but those are my favorite things about him. And I'm so excited for you guys to meet him because you're going to learn so much. I learn so much from him all the time by cyber stalking him. So please help me welcome Charlie to our little coffee chat.
Hey there.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining. How are you?
Good. I'm envious of your outdoor setup there.
I mean, I have to enjoy it while I'm in Texas.
Yeah.
If I'm not in New York City, I have to be outside.
Yeah, for sure. Just be careful and don't go outside of that little enclosed area down there.
I never leave. It's like
it's totally fine.
I go to the store once a week. It's like my big highlight. I'm like, exciting. Okay, hard-hitting questions first.
Sure.
Do you drink coffee?
I am not a coffee drinker.
Or any caffeine?
Caffeine, you know what? It's not the caffeine. It's the coffee taste. That's like
me.
I just don't like the actual taste. And what's interesting actually is I spoke to somebody who, I don't know if they made this up, but they said they got their taste buds tested and that they're some kind of like bitter super taster. And like me, they not only don't drink coffee, but they don't drink alcohol. And I don't like the taste of alcohol. It's not a moral issue or anything else like that. I feel like it's a very sharp taste for me. And so I might be a bitter super taster.
Okay, we've already learned something new because I didn't even know super tasters were a thing.
That's a thing, apparently. Yeah, it's like
we're gonna get done with this, and I'm gonna be Googling super taster taste bud.
Yeah, it's like a taste bud per square inch thing or something. So,
see, you're already dropping knowledge, and we haven't even started yet.
I'm just hydrating with water.
You're just hydrating. Well, thank you for joining us. We're so excited to have you, and so excited because we are going to suck all the knowledge out of your brain, and we're basically just going to copy your homework, and it's going to be so fun.
So what's funny though is that that's actually what I wanted to do with you. And the genesis of this whole thing was I wanted to interview you, and you judo moved me, judo chopped me here and flipped it around. So like I'll try and add something, but I'm gonna pick your brain as well.
Well, I feel like what's so interesting is that we're trying to pick my brain about personal branding. And for anybody that doesn't know Charlie is like the king of personal branding. Like if you are in the startup New York scene, you know about Charlie. You want to go on Twitter, CEO, NYC, Charlie. Like you're everywhere. Everyone knows you.
Which is my initials, by the way.
Which is your initials. Smart.
It's not a little. It feels a little bit narcissistic if you don't know that.
No, I mean your newsletter touches literally thousands upon thousands of people, all about startups, all about the ecosphere. I know when I started my company in New York, I was recommended to talk to you like by 5 different people who are all unrelated.
Mm-hmm.
So what's so funny is I kind of feel like you're amazing at personal branding. Like you're everywhere in the startup scene in New York. So, was that on purpose? Did that sort of just like happen as you got more into the scene?
I will say, and it's interesting because one of the reasons why I reached out to you is because I feel like there was a moment over the past couple of years where you got much more intentional about creating brand around yourself. Like you had a successful company, and then there was a much more intentionally sort of well-crafted, like, oh, like Kim is not just the person I know who's running this company. Kim is a thing now, and you were actively caring and feeding it. And when you ask about sort of how I got there, I feel like in some sense, like I joined the venture capital asset class in 2001. And so literally, I always say this, and I should figure out exactly what date it is, but at some point in the next year, it will literally be half my life ago. Okay, which is crazy to think that. And
wow.
So in some ways, the benefit to starting sort of in that cohort is you wind up just being early to things, right? Where, when LinkedIn went public, I got that little email that said, congrats for being one of the first, I don't know, whatever it was, 10,000 or 50,000 people on LinkedIn. I started a blog in February of 2004. So I've been blogging now for about 16 years plus.
Wow.
I joined Twitter super early. I joined Twitter at a moment, and will just tell you how early it was, where every single tweet from all the people that you followed would get texted to you. And it was not unmanageable. So
okay.
Isn't that insane to just
That's
think
insane.
Right?
That's actually insane.
Right.
But it just goes to show that like to me, you're always like first to market. Like you're the first one. Like I feel like I learned so much from you because you're like in the know.
Yeah, I think it's less so being in the know and more like, I don't necessarily think that that's, sort of much different than anybody else who's sort of in that cohort of, early in venture, the junior person at the venture. If you were a junior person at a venture firm at any time between 2004 and 2014, right? Like your job was to try all the stuff, right? And if you stuck with it, eventually you sort of gained a following, whatever. I think what happens now, and so I think in some ways I've just been fortunate to just be early, and there's a compounding effect.
Right.
Right. What I'm super curious about is how people jump into those platforms now. Now that, there's already people who have jumped out to a start. Like I'm curious about how somebody, starts Instagram a year ago and now today has 20,000 followers, right? Because it's one thing if you were on it.
Totally. Well, it's so funny. Okay, so Cassie just said the same thing. So Cassie and I have had many conversations about this. And, I feel like as she's another female founder, like as a female founder, the whole reason that I really started to put myself out there more is I would go to all these, whether it was high schools or colleges, and people would say, oh my gosh, like this is so great. I didn't even know, a female founder existed. Again, these are like high schools. So, right. To them, the thing is all about Mark Zuckerberg and, that sort of thing. And so they were like, I didn't even know that this like could be a thing. And so it sort of triggered something in me that I'm like, wait a second, like this is just not being represented for other people. And I sort of felt this little voice inside me say, for so many young women or men, by the way, like if you can't see it, you can't be it. It's when someone says, oh, we're meeting a CEO today, and someone's immediate reaction is, well, what time is he coming in?
For sure.
Why does it have to be what time he is coming in? Why can't it be what time they're coming in? And we don't know if it's a boy or a girl. So I felt this call to like, and not only that, I know amazing people like you, and Helene Knapp from City Row was on with last week. Like, I know all these amazing people from New York. I meet all these amazing people, and that's rare. Like, not everybody gets to know you. And so I was like, I have all this great knowledge. I keep it all to myself because I just do. And there's not a lot of women out there. So I just sort of felt this call, and that's why I pushed Cassie and so many other female founders that I'm like, I know it's uncomfortable and I know you're busy and I know there's always something better to do, but like, please put yourself out there just for like the world.
And I have a little bit of a theory about like sort of why this happened. So, I've backed at Brooklyn Bridge Ventures about 70-ish companies, and
you've backed a lot of women.
Yes. So about 40% of the companies have at least one female founder.
Which, can we talk about how rare that is for everybody who's joining that might not know? Like, what Charlie just said is like a unicorn.
Yeah,
like, that doesn't happen.
Feels what's like by number, I think it's around 10 or 15 or something like that, by number, not by dollars, but by number, right? So it's much higher, and there are a few, and I could happy to go into some of the reasons around that. But what I notice is that, and this is a total gross generalization, right?
Hit me with it.
Is that the female founders that I backed are very goal-oriented, like directly goal-oriented. I have this to do, I have that to do, I have that to do. And being on Twitter does not solve any of those immediate to-dos. Or at least it's not obvious how they do that, right? And what I'll push sometimes is that I think social media creates opportunity. It's sort of investing in serendipity, right? Because you do have fun, you do have hiring to do, you do have fundraising to do, right? Sending a tweet doesn't immediately solve your fundraising problem, but just think about it the other way, right? You show up on the doorstep of some Silicon Valley VC and they've never heard of you before. There's no buzz about you personally. There's no buzz about your company.
Right.
If you think that the quality of your PowerPoint deck and the numbers, the execution numbers, which I'm sure are very good, but the reality is you only had a seed round to get them there. So you're operating with, your team of 4, like no money, like how good are they gonna be?
Right.
Probably not that, like you'll do your best, right? But it's for most people who show up in that meeting, it's not the numbers alone that are going to carry you. And so much more of it is, oh, I've heard of her. I watched her talk. I've been hearing about the company.
Right.
I saw the thing you wrote. And sometimes it's like, they've never heard of you, but then they got.
Does personal branding play a role in, I'm not an investor, but you're an investor. Yeah. Like if you, I don't know, like an idea comes across your desk and you're like, oh, I've seen that person on Twitter, or I heard them on a panel or whatever. Are you more inclined to read it than if it's another idea with somebody that you've never heard of? I mean, I know we talk a lot about biases and whatever, but like, I have to imagine it's like a restaurant. I would go to a restaurant that a friend was like, that's a great restaurant, or I've heard of the restaurant.
Right. Or just the other way around, of like, you hear of a restaurant, you show up on that restaurant's webpage, right? So what's your webpage as a founder?
Right.
Is it your, like, I mean, here's a perfectly good example. This happened, well, maybe. So I interviewed a founder. I won't give it away because he's not super public about the fact that he um, is doing a startup. But I, maybe about 6 months ago, so back in the before times when we used to get together in person, I would run these.
4 days.
Yeah, I would run these dinners, these neighborhood dinners.
I've been to one. They're great.
Right. And we would go neighborhood by neighborhood. We'd split the cost of a chef. The host would eat for free. It was great. I can't wait until we do them again. We've done them virtually. It was nice. Not quite the same. Anyway, I was looking for people in tech who lived in a certain neighborhood. And so I tweeted out, like, who lives in this neighborhood? A couple of retweets later, this guy raises his hand and says, yeah, I live there. Great. Okay. Guy gets invited to the dinner. Now he's on my radar. Right. And later on, I am doing a series of interviews about a particular topic. And I noticed that this is a topic that this person is interested in. And I noticed that because he's still in my peripheral vision because of his presence in social media. Right? Had my only encounter with him been the one dinner 6 months ago, like, we didn't have any transactional reason to interact between now and then, right? But he's on my radar just because we're following each other, right? So I wound up interviewing him on this topic, which he has shown that he has some expertise on. And it's great talk, right? He follows up and he's like, hey, I'm working on a thing on the side, right? And now I have these two interactions with him, right? Because I not only, he got on my radar because of the dinner and that created an opportunity, right? So now he becomes sort of this three-dimensional human in my mind, not just a face on a PowerPoint deck, but I've actually interacted with him.
You have to invest in the serendipity. It's like what you said before, like, you have to make time for the magic. Like, when people are like, you're so lucky. I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah.
That luck was made, my friend, by going to the dinners, by following people on Twitter, by staying in the sphere. Like, that you make that.
Right. And also, he backs it up, right? Because my interview with him was so good that I was like, oh, no, he actually knows what he's talking about. And I think this is a reason why some people have an aversion to social media, because you and I both know people who are good at hacking a following that are, in my mind, unfollowable. Like, just nothing. Just absolutely, like, they just seem to be good at building awareness. But anybody who's actually in the know, and this happens in the startup world all the time because so much of it is so opaque, that as a new founder, you're like, oh, that person's a startup influencer. And it's based on whatever, something they did 30 years ago. And they've just been built up to be a startup influencer since then.
That was what I was going to say. Because, like, so there's lots, we all know lots of examples of, like, celebrity brands, right?
Right.
You know, Jessica Simpson wants to start a shoe company. Jessica Alba starts Honest. Kristen Bell has a brand. Sarah Michelle Gellar has a brand. All these celebrities then have brands. And so, you know, what I've always wondered, and, like, as an investor, I don't know the answer, is it better to have, like, a celebrity say, I'm Mark Wahlberg and I want to start a decent burger chain, you know, called Wahlburgers. So, like, a so-so idea, but, like, a really well-known person.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it better to have a killer idea? You know, I'm some group from Australia and I want to start this crazy thing called Canva that no one's ever heard of. You know, is it better to have a killer idea and no one know who you are? Or is it better to have, like, a decent idea and be a celebrity?
Well, so, like all startup advice, and this is why I think it's really difficult to give really good startup advice.
Totally.
It really depends. And I will go, and I know founders hate that answer, and I'll go a level deeper. Not every type of business demands the same thing, right? So if you look at something like Canva is the kind of thing where you have this very specific need and you're like, okay, I don't know how to use Photoshop and it's way too complicated for me, but I occasionally have the need for a little edit here and there. I mean, I did it the other day where I stuck our headshots on a template that I was using because I had a particular format that I wanted to use, right? So you just need to know how to hack SEO. You need to know how to hack sort of the growth hacking. It wouldn't have been helpful if Mark Wahlberg had started Canva, right? Because
right.
I wouldn't have been like, oh, Mark Wahlberg's a guy that I think about when I'm like designing stuff.
Right.
So I'll go into that, right? However, let's say it's somebody in the fashion space, right? Where
it makes sense.
Fashion is much more about than just the manufacture of the clothing.
Right.
It's
the
about
brand, it's the story, it's all the things.
That, right? And now again, Mark Wahlberg starting a women's clothing line, probably not the right guy for that, right? Yeah. But there might be some people who you follow as a celebrity who you're like, yeah, I do like that person's style. I like their approach. And I'm inclined to check that out. So I think for the right person, I think it is meaningful. But at the same time, and some of those people, by being a celebrity, they've hacked certain things, right? It may be easier for them to fundraise just because they know more wealthy people, right? It may be easier for them to get press because we live in this celebrity-obsessed culture. And
totally. Well, and imagine getting a pitch email, if my inbox all of a sudden said George Clooney, I'd be like, let me open that up.
Right.
So, I mean, and you get, by the way, your inbox is flooded with pitches because you're very great and you're totally open to that. And so, I mean, because you see so many of them, and by the way, I have this theory where we're all pitching ourselves. If you work in corporate, you're trying to get a promotion,
right,
or you want the corner office or whatever, you're trying to get a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you're constantly pitching yourself, trying to make friends or whatever. And so as someone
took me 38 years to craft my pitch to the point where my wife I finally found someone where I had a good enough pitch to get to marry me.
Listen, we're all working on our pitches, you know?
Right.
So because you see so many pitches from a business standpoint, obviously a lot of people Jeffrey and Mark and, Jen and stuff who are joining us. Some people might be, founders, but other people might be corporate people. What makes for terrible pitches? Because I'm sure you've seen terrible pitches. Mm-hmm. And then what makes for good pitches?
For sure. So I have an answer to that. And I'll tell you one quick anecdote about the celebrity thing too. The level of involvement of the person is really important.
Very true.
Okay, because there's a lot of celebrities that lend their name to things and they're not
and then go to sleep
actively involved. Yeah. And there's a really great podcast somewhere about Kim Kardashian and Glue Mobile and her app, about how actively she was involved in crafting the storylines and all that she was really in it. And I think that made the game better because it was about being a celebrity. Anyway, so level of involvement is really important, especially, and that goes for advisors, people to bring up pitches, right? People say, hey, so-and-so is an advisor of mine, whatever. And when you poke at it and their involvement is very small, it's not worthwhile. It's almost better that they're not involved at all.
Yeah.
So most basically, a bad pitch is one where I don't actually know what it is you're doing. And you'd be so surprised at how many times people try and impress and they wind up obfuscating what they're doing, right? If you make blue boxes, right, just say we are a blue box making company, right? Don't say we use innovative, handcrafted, supply chain economies of scale, or whatever buzzwords you can throw into that. I'm sitting here like, but what do you guys make? What is the actual?
I get it.
Right? Because sometimes just the simplicity of, blue boxes, yeah, cool. There's definitely need of them. There's always red boxes. We don't have enough blue ones. Okay, I'm intrigued. Like, tell me more. What makes it different? Give me the hook. If my default as an investor, and frankly, our default everywhere is
Human.
no. Our default is no, right? Somebody reaches out to you on a dating platform or whatever. You're not default yes. You are default no. Your default is I'm going to sit on the couch. I'm in my pajamas. I got my ice cream, I got my popcorn, whatever.
Right.
You have to move me off of my default, especially now. Right?
Especially now. Well, I feel like, to Jen's point, like being clear, and to your point, like being simple. I think one thing that LinkedIn has right now that I think is so perfect, you can set your profile to this little green thing that says open for work. Like if you got furloughed or you're looking for a job, whatever, because I think sometimes people dance around the issue, right? Like I'm looking for a challenging opportunity. It's like, You want a job, I'm trying to find a job.
Just tell me.
Like let's put the green bar, you're open to work. Like what's that? Keep it simple, stupid.
Kiss. Yeah, exactly.
Like just the KISS method of like, be clear what you do, what you want.
But I'll put an addendum on that though. I think it's important to be clear without necessarily being transactional.
True.
So instead of saying I want a job, saying I work with these types of companies. I work with this company at this stage. So then it's like less on like, what do you want from me? And then I feel like I failed you if you haven't gotten a job. But like, oh, I get it. You work for companies at exactly this type, at exactly this stage. If I have something, I'll bring it up. Otherwise, I'll pocket it for later. So I know exactly what you're trying to do. And I think the more specific, the better. Like if you're saying, hey, I work with companies who have no branding at all, who at least want to get to the point where they could give the hint of what the brand would be like so that they could raise enough angel money or enough VC money to actually pay an agency to do the whole full-blown thing, so that I'm not emptying out my life savings so I can pay an agency $250,000 to come up with a brand that may or may not be the right one.
Right.
If somebody approached me with that, which by the way, my wife, Asia Singer, who's a creative director, would be awesome at that. So I have to pitch her,
plug.
Right? To just give you the basics of a brand, to have one individual creator help you on that. Everybody knows at least one person who has an idea for a brand but doesn't have $250,000 to go page and lane. And they would be like, oh my God, I know exactly who to show you to because you've been super specific, as opposed to if you were just like, I do creative strategy, and you're like, I don't know when, where, how, for whom. Like there's just not enough specificity there, and I don't know what to do with it.
Right. I mean, it's definitely, it's an interesting thing as well to really build relationships as opposed to transactional asks. Like I know, I'm sure you get them too, but I get a ton of cold emails. I get cold DMs on LinkedIn. I don't even know how they get my email address, but I get cold emails from people. And sometimes when maybe after a glass of wine, I'm feeling especially frisky, I will actually write back to one of these cold emails and be like, here's the list of like, okay, wait, first of all, you're asking if I need like robot parts. Did you even look at my website? Do I work with robots? Do I have needs for robots? No. You cut and pasted this message from God knows where, and you're splooging it out everywhere. So, I mean, the cold email and again, you must see a ton of them because you are so well known and your email address is out there. I mean,
or just because they give away money for a living.
Right. Or because you give away money for a living. But with these cold emails, like, and I know some people get really hung up. Like somebody on here might really want to reach out to you after this.
I am fine with cold email. Email.
But somebody might, I think sometimes people struggle with the cold email. Like, I don't know how to write it. Like, how do I start it? It sounds awkward. Like, if you were to write a cold email, like, what's kind of your strategy? Because you get a lot of them.
So first of all, I think you have to know why you're reaching out to the person, and you really need to feel like you can actually offer value. So if I reached out to somebody and I saw, for example, I reached out to somebody who was really, really good at doing content marketing for food brands.
Oh.
And I have a portfolio company that sells software and services to mostly food brands. And so I reached out. I mean, first of all, I took the time to kind of poke around all of her online presence. And the last thing that she had posted was like a recipe for octopus. And so I was like,
random, but okay.
I have something for that, because the best octopus I've ever had is in this like random seaside restaurant in the Algarve in Portugal. And so I had the picture of it on Instagram, and I put the headline, best octopus in the world or whatever. Right. And I put the link, and like, of course she's going to respond to that. Because
who's not going to respond to an octopus email?
Right. Because if nothing else, it shows that I took the time to like see what she was all about, and I found a way to connect. Right. And I'm, look, everybody in New York likes to think of themselves as a foodie. I like to eat food. I do not consider myself an expert. But I had something, I was making the try, and then I also followed it up with, I have a company that is selling in to brands, and there's a company called We Stock, and they help companies get on the whole food shelf. Like, you want to sell into grocery chain X, like they're the people you want to talk to, right? I know that because she's in the food space, she's run into brands that have asked that question before. She knows that that's a question that a lot of people ask. And so immediately she's like, oh, that sounds interesting, right? I want to talk to them, right? Yeah. And so I knew I had something. And so I was less worried about, how do I craft it? And more like, do I authentically have something, and can we find a real connection?
Yeah.
And I think, like, if you can't think of something, it probably means you have you either A, might not actually have something to offer, or B, you really have engaged enough. I get pitches all the time for people who want to work in venture, who are like, I'm such a fan of what Brooklyn Bridge Ventures is doing. I'd love to work with you and your team. Okay, well, we're an investment team of 1 and a total team of 2. And so, like,
right.
I don't know, like, you basically sent this to everyone, right?
Right.
Like, and you didn't say why. Like, there's a lot of things about what we do as Brooklyn Bridge Ventures that's super different.
Totally different.
Give me one thing.
Right.
Anything.
Give me something. Anything.
Anything.
Something small. Right. A morsel.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that we don't completely flip this, right? So as a founder, and I know you've talked a little bit about like creating opportunities and all that sort of stuff. When you do this stuff and, put yourself out there, when you write, when you make appearances, Are you thinking very specifically of like, these are my goals when I do this? Or is it just generally the more people that follow Kim, the better it is for my company? Or are you more specific about it?
No, two things that I've like really sort of super focused on probably in the last like 15 months.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, I have found that my biggest aha moments,
Mm-hmm.
those Oprah aha moments, have really come from things that other people have said. I mean, yes, sometimes I read a book or I don't know, it just like comes out of nowhere. But usually it's I was at a networking, tech dinner, or I was at a coffee, or somebody said something.
Right.
And it just sort of burrowed. And then like 2 days later, it solves a problem that I was thinking about, or it sparks something. And so what I was like, how do I create more opportunities from that? And that comes from other humans that are smart and talented and wonderful. So when
Have you read Where Good Ideas Come From?
Good ideas come from other people.
No, but have you read the book Where Good Ideas Come From?
No.
Yeah, it's literally all about, it's a Stephen Johnson book. It's a great read. Okay. It's about cross-pollination of ideas.
I'm going to write this down because obviously I need to read that book because I've never read it. So that's number one, is like selfishly, how do I create? And by the way, everyone who's in this group right now, Clarence and Jen and Sarah, like I literally leave and I'm like, oh my God, Sarah said that one point. Like that was 2 days later, I'm thinking about it. So selfishly, I create moments for the magic to happen. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. And two, I sound like such a Hallmark card of like disgusting cheesiness, but I do think that the more you give, the more you get. And I think the more that you can, give knowledge, or I read this book, or I listen to this podcast, or meet my friend Charlie, he's so great, you get that back. Right. I don't know what you believe in, God, Allah, the universe, karma, whatever, it comes back. Right. Like tenfold. So I think putting it out there, is sort of and that's why I'm so bullish on people of building a, and I hate the word personal brand, by the way. I don't know what the right word is.
I do too, but
it's disgusting. We have to find another word for it, but like whatever it is you want to call it, I'm so bullish about it and about building it because I actually think it ends up helping you. Like exactly what you said earlier, like you make room for these magic moments. Like if you aren't on Twitter, then no one could retweet your tweet about where to have the dinner for the guy to find it and raise his hand. Like you have to put it out there. Or Sarah's question, do you schedule magic moments? I think this is a magic moment. I schedule this every Wednesday. And I also schedule, I take meetings that make no sense because I'm like, you never know, something.
So I have a particular comment about, I'm so glad that comment popped up because I was eyeing it and I wanted to reference it. I think one of the things that at least I try and do is to be able to scale my accessibility. So my goal as a firm and an investor is to be the most accessible VC in New York.
I love that.
That doesn't necessarily mean I'm open for any meeting anywhere because that's like completely untenable and you'll never get any work done, right?
Right.
So I basically, and I have a pretty high bar for taking one-on-one meetings. I probably actually take fewer one-on-one meetings than a lot of other investors, but I do more personal interactions. So for example, scheduling the magic moments. You have made this series into a little machine here. Like it was very like I got the email, I got the pre-scheduling thing, we got the test to make sure the lighting and the shine off my head was okay and all of that sort of stuff, right? But like I'm sure the first few times you did this, it took you a lot of time and effort, right? And fits and starts and all that sort of stuff. But you've made this into a replicable thing that the amount of incremental administrative minutes for you personally is pretty minimal.
Yeah.
Each incremental one, because you've decided you wanted to do a weekly series or every couple of weeks, whatever, right? And you've figured out how to turn that into a machine. We do that with our dinners. We schedule, a dinner or two a month, and we've been doing that for the last like 7 years. And I remember another VC saying, wait. You do 15 to 20 dinners a year? We tried to schedule a dinner last month, and oh my God, it was like a total nightmare and all this.
Nightmare.
I said, yeah, but that's your problem. You tried to schedule one dinner. If you basically said by design, we're doing 20, you schedule them very differently, right? Like no name tags, no, and it doesn't have to be, Anthony, the CEO of Squarespace, or, Katrina, the CEO of Stitch Fix, or whatever. It could just be the iPhone developer at Stitch Fix, which is totally cool. And that person's awesome too. And you change the way you do something if you're trying to do it in a replicable way.
Well, it's like those replicable magic moments. It's exactly, if you try to do like a one-off magic moment, it's kind of like working out. You're like, oh, I did that one workout, but then you kind of forget about it and you don't really do it. It's like, no, I have to work out every week with like a buddy or else I won't freaking do it. It's like, I have to do magic every week over and over again.
I do these Friday lunches, and it's basically a little bit of a catch-all for, these people who, I want to catch up with. We don't have an immediate reason, or they start following on Twitter. We get into a little conversation, and I want to take it into real life, but I maybe don't have the one-on-one time. I put 6 or 7 people who were generally in the New York tech ecosystem. When it was in person, we just picked a place. And I made sure I picked a place where it was like a food court. Everybody checks out for themselves. We don't have to worry about the one guy that got a salad whose thing was cheaper than everybody else or whatever, right? Just made it easy to manage. And, you do 5 people a week, 40, 50 weeks out of the year, all of a sudden you've had a lot of in-person connections and a lot of people who be like, oh, you should talk to Charlie because I actually talked to him in person last week in a group of 5 or 6, and he seemed like a reasonable guy, or he gave me pain in the ass questions and they were helpful to my startup or whatever. Like, that's why a bunch of different people said, you should talk to me. Not because I'm, smart or special or anything. It's just because I know that I have more in-person conversations with other VCs.
And by the way, anyone can do this, what we're talking about.
Right.
Like,
you
can be a 22-year-old assistant. And like, you can do like, you don't have to be Charlie with a fund of $30 million. Like, you can literally.
My favorite all-time example of this, have you ever heard of the 20-Minute VC podcast?
No.
Okay, so there's this
guy. We're dropping all these.
Yeah.
We got a book to read. We got a podcast.
Harry Stebbings, I'm pretty sure he was like 19 when he started this. And he just mass emailed a bunch of VCs and was like, will you come on my podcast? It's 20 minutes. And like, not everybody said yes, but a handful of people were like, sure.
Yeah.
And the trick to a podcast is the fact that it doesn't matter if you have a following, because I have a little bit of a following. So if you have no listeners and all you do is conduct an interview,
right,
then you're my outsourced audio engineer who just created an interview with me that I could push out to my Twitter, which is fine. It's worth it for the 20 minutes or half hour, right?
Right.
Well, so he eventually got more and more people, and before long, he had 100 interviews with all these VCs, and the reality is like, who the fuck is this guy? He's just some random kid who liked venture, right? But here's the funny thing: after 100, somebody actually offered for him to run a fund, which you think is crazy, but then it's like not so crazy, because here's somebody who essentially did a VC specific MBA, who did interviews with 150 different investors, so he probably knows a little something, and all of these investors know who he is because he had a good conversation with them. That's a pretty good head start for being a VC from nowhere, from absolutely total nowhere, right? You could do that.
It's a good playbook to steal.
Yeah.
That's a good
100% stealable.
Good. Okay, I'm gonna listen to the podcast and I'm gonna steal it for Coffee with Kim, obviously. Okay, I'm all hopped up on my matcha now, by the way.
Okay.
So I have to copy your homework. We all have to copy your homework, and you have to make us look cool. Because for anybody that hasn't joined, like all the things that I've talked about previously, I got from Charlie. Nickel Pass, I've been obsessed with.
Nice, right?
I got that from your newsletter. I have not stopped. I talked about it last week on Coffee with Kim, talked about the week for that. I can't stop talking about it. People are probably sick of me hearing me talk about it, but I got that from you. And your newsletter, which by the way, everyone on here should sign up for Charlie's newsletter, because then you will learn about things like this.
And it finally has its own site. And NYCweeklynewsletter.com.
Newsletter. You have to sign up. It's amazing. And so, okay, what startup? Like, I feel like you know about things before they're big. Like, I heard about Ample Hills from you, and then I saw it in Whole Foods like 6 months later. What, so that we can sound cool on our Zoom dinner parties, like what is going to be cool in 6 months that like no one's, like the baby brand before they blow up? Like, what's not cool but is going to be cool?
That's really interesting. So
a brand or a company.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, there's a couple of things that I'm really psyched about. I mean, when you said baby, the first thing I thought of was Assembly.
Oh, I don't know that.
So
we have to Google this.
Yeah. Assembly is a eco-friendly diapering company. So you may not know this, but something like 30 or 50% or some crazy percentage of all of the non-biodegradable stuff in landfills is diapers, is disposable diapers, which is like the average kid uses something like 8,000 diapers over the course. I mean, just like think of like the size of a human baby and a pile of 8,000 diapers. Okay, it's a lot. It's a real problem. Right?
Okay.
And so Assembly takes the best parts of cloth diapering, which is the not having to throw away diapers all the time, and matches it with the best parts of regular diapers, which is that they're actually usable and don't leak and all of this sort of stuff, because
key. Usability.
Yeah, usability is really, really important. And so they have this great system where like the inside is cloth and the outside looks more like a regular diaper and performs more like a regular diaper. So it's got the elastic around the leg band and all of this sort of stuff.
Can we buy these things? Like, can I recommend this to a friend and act really smart? Like, oh, you haven't heard of this?
Assembly baby. Yes. And you can eco shame them and be like, what? So you're just like throwing away diapers all the time. So like, what kind of a world are you bringing your kid into? And if you don't want to be an eco shamer, it's just cheaper.
Oh, well, I love me.
If you don't have to keep buying them,
I love me a good deal. Okay, done. Check mark. Okay, yes. What app or tool, because you already told me about Nickel Pass, so you can't use that. But what like app or tool are you like loving right now? Like it's on your rotation, you're kind of clicking it every day or opening it up on your phone every day. Yeah, hit me with it.
I got to say, I'll tell you what it isn't. It's definitely not Clubhouse. I'm this close away from deleting Clubhouse. I'm a little. I've reached my.
Okay, tell people what Clubhouse is in case
Okay.
people don't know.
So, Clubhouse, which is the second cool startup to be named Clubhouse, the first being a startup that I invested in, which is some really great product management software. It's been around for 5 years, and it's got a ton of employees and all of this sort of stuff, right? But there's this other Clubhouse that you may have heard of.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine getting stuck in a cafe in Silicon Valley where everyone is talking about tech in Silicon Valley.
Right.
And the whole thing is self-referential, little bubble ecosystem, whatever. It's like a live podcast in a way.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that is. And it just, every time I go into it, it makes me so glad to be a VC in New York.
Yeah.
Where so many people are working on tech in New York, and it's the last thing they want to talk about.
It's like the East Coast, West Coast rap battle. Only it's the East Coast, West Coast tech battle.
Right. And the best part of East Coast tech is that we don't care to just only talk about tech.
Right.
We want to talk about like solving problems, and it's like we don't have tech companies here. We have wine companies and healthcare companies and diaper companies and Liz from Assembly is never going to go to a tech conference. She might go to a diaper conference, but
I'm so glad we know about that diaper I cannot wait to Google that, by the way.
Right.
Okay, last question. So
is that you sharing anything or
no?
Okay.
Please. Trying to survive.
Yeah.
Okay, you write a newsletter, which I think is super interesting because I not only subscribe to your newsletter, but like I get a bunch of other ones, the Broad Street from Wall Street Journal, a couple other ones. So I feel like you wouldn't be a snob, but like you probably are a very good connoisseur of other newsletters because you have a newsletter. So are there any newsletters that you're like, this has passed my litmus test of like, this is worth it to get into my inbox?
I have to say, I am a pretty terrible newsletter reader, only because of like the nature of it all being in the inbox.
Right.
Because the inbox as a reading tool does not work for me. Because I go in and I see the newsletters, and there's also a founder that I funded or some pressing thing that's coming up, right, that I need to respond to. And so I can't help but get into that. So maybe this is an app that might work for some people. I am trying it, and I'm trying to get better about making time to go into it. It's called Stoop Inbox.
Stoop, like I'm sitting on a stoop in New York?
Yes.
Okay, Stoop Inbox.
STOOP.
Okay.
And you basically like unsubscribe from all your newsletters and resubscribe with like your screen name at Stoop Inbox.
Oh.
And so what you wind up getting is basically an inbox that's like only for newsletters. And so you just see like all of your newsletters are just right there.
Okay.
Like there's my broadsheet.
There's your broadsheet. Okay.
And so you can just quickly sort of go through newsletter time only.
Right. Zoom through them.
Yeah. And actually, I'll throw out one that I'm also using more. I've become a Calendly convert.
I've heard about it. I'm not on it.
Yeah. So I think we need to get over ourselves when it comes to being handed a link to schedule a meeting. I was one of the original Tungle users back in the day. I use an app called Schedule Once. So like if somebody wanted to pitch me and they're a New York-based startup, I have a little request tool on my site. And so you can say, hey, I'd like this meeting, and you can put in your little blurb. It doesn't mean I take all the requests. I don't accept all of them. But it's just really easy because when I do want to take a meeting, I just hit OK and pick the time, and then it's done. And then I don't need to burden somebody else with my administrative overhead, right? The thing I like about Calendly, and there's an app for it and a Chrome plugin, is that I can create a one-time link for for a single meeting. And so you could be like, hey, we should catch up one-on-one. I have a couple of things to talk about. Yeah. And I could just DM, text, or whatever, the one-time use Calendly link that you could just grab a time and confirm that meeting without me doing anything. And it's done after you use it. And I've found that to be really helpful.
Okay. I think they have a free trial. Yes, I think they do.
I'm not paying for it yet, only because I think I'm just one user. So I don't think I've hit where I need. There's a couple of sort of freemium things.
Okay. And I'm all about the free trial. I got to try before I buy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That's that's how you get me as a consumer. I'm like the 14-day free trial.
Right.
I'm in.
Exactly. And the other newsletter that I'll bring up and is it's called For the Love.
For the Love. I don't know about this one either.
It's a Substack. It may or may not be written by my lovely creative director wife.
Love it.
And so, she just started also on the newsletter trail, and it is much more thoughtfully and creatively crafted than whatever garbage I spew out on Monday mornings. So
I don't believe that for a second. I think you both are probably extremely talented and have equally lovely newsletters.
You know what's funny though? Like, more so than anything else, I think the advice I would sort of give to people related to everything we've talked about is I think you got to lean into what feels you and what you like doing and what you're, kind of good at, right? So I'm sure that you will have some people that will jump in and follow my newsletter. And I got to be honest, if you're a red voter in a red state, that might be a quick unsubscribe, right? But that is what I'm somebody who grew up super conservative. I grew up at a time where, 80s, 90s, early 90s, New York, anti-crime, kind of thing. And I grew up with a very particular narrative. And I have shifted over time, and I've become a lot more, political. But the reality is, I'm not looking to build to a certain number of newsletter followers.
Right.
And if we can't have a sort of, a dialogue, or if this isn't for you, then that's fine. That's okay. Right. And if you're the type of person who you're like, oh, I don't want to get political. I'm half Italian. I want to get in an argument with you. Right. Half of me just wants to get in an argument just to get in an argument. Right. And so you're going to know very quickly that that's my style.
Totally.
And I really think that rather than say, oh, there's a good way to write a newsletter, a bad way to write a newsletter, make your newsletter be you, and your subscribers will self-select for wanting to follow what you have to say or not. And just, don't worry about it.
100%. It's love you or hate you, but commit.
Right.
Commit either way. You're not going to please everyone. Not everyone's going to be a fan, but
it's totally fine.
Totally fine. Well, thank you so much. I know you're so busy, so I really appreciate that we got to have a chat and that everybody got to join us with our catch up and our chat. And for anyone that's really curious, continuing the conversation about personal branding, I encourage you on Charlie's Twitter. I watched a conversation that he had last night.
On a few Instagram ones too.
Monday, you had one on Instagram. So all the social channels, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Charlie's talking about personal branding across many platforms. So whichever platform you like, there's a good chance that Charlie's there having conversations this week.
Sure.
So,
I'm not good at TikTok. I'm just
okay. No TikTok, but the other ones,
the
other ones we have covered. But you know, I so appreciate you and everyone, you know, Daniel, Nick, and Jim, and Sarah, and everybody for joining. This was so great. And I feel like, again, I have so much to Google after we sign off here. So thank you for
You have
all
diapers to gift.
Google. I have all these diapers to Google. So thank you.
Nice. Thank you so
I
much.
love it. We'll have a great rest of the week.
You too.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.